Oh, come on. Look what they've done. Look how they massacred my boy. I have so much work to do. You want to hear a story? All right. Why don't you take a seat over there somewhere if you can find a place. Oh. Now tell me, have you ever heard the story of Brodin, the Lord of Games? I thought not. Not a story the media would tell you nowadays. It's an old legend. Allow me to detail for you what's become of this place. One moment, please. That's better. Oh. Where's that card? Ah, there it is. Here we go. Oh, you're gonna kick out of this. I haven't used this thing since middle school. All right. Now, if I remember correctly, it's just, oh, yeah, there it is. You see, back in the day, there were these establishments of worship and prayer known as gyms, in which one would endeavor feats of strength in hopes of joining the Swole Patrol come next summer. And if you were a good little boy and completed the unmandated physical labor, then you'd be blessed with bountiful gains from Lord Brodin himself. Unfortunately, in the current timeline, cracking open a cold one with the boys has taken on new meaning. So, the Iron Temples have been shut down. Now, this is all that remains. Doesn't have quite the same ring to it as Iron Temple, but with a little imagination, why, it could be anything. In fact, right now, I could be working up a sweat in the fiery pits of Mount Doom. Oh no, you guys are doing great over there, don't mind me. Let's get my pump in. Oh yeah. Look at my body. And my feelings at the same time. Of course, helps to have a green screen. Anywho, the last time I was able to safely step foot in one of these places was the year 2019, the summer of which gave way to quite the unique experience, if I do say so myself. It involves this little thing called reading and a gym, or more accurately, reading at a gym on a treadmill at 4 miles per hour. Now, by today's newly defined expectations for insanity, that may not sound all that crazy to you. However, judging from all the absurd gazes at the time, I can assure you that it was quite the uncommon practice. And it all started with a conversation. At the beginning of said summer, a dear friend of mine had recommended a book to me they'd recently finished. Or, more accurately, they shoved the damn thing in my face and said, "Read it so we can talk about it." So, after some convincing and unveiling the story's plot, I decided to give it a try. That book was none other than The Long Walk by Richard Bachman. And don't worry, I returned it to him afterwards because I'm not a monster. Unlike some of you. It just so happens that they forgot to take it back with them before moving to the polar opposite end of the country. Typical. Rest assured, it's in good hands. As many of you clever girls may be aware, Richard Bachman is a pen name used by Stephen King, so you just know it ends happily. To bring you up to speed, The Long Walk depicts an annual competition known as, well, The Walk, in which 100 teenage boys compete to see who can walk the longest. These walkers must maintain a minimum pace of 4 miles per hour or risk receiving a warning after 30 seconds. After 3 warnings, the walker then buys a ticket and is removed from the competition. The winner takes home what is colloquially referred to as the prize, which in essence is anything he wants for the rest of his life. Unlimited Totino's pizza rolls? You got it. Every expansion pack of Zoo Tycoon 2 known to man? You got it. One of those sick, inflatable obstacle courses you basically had to drain your neighbor's bank accounts by selling them actual trash just to go in once? You got it. The possibilities are endless. Well, kinda endless. I mean, you only get to pick one after all, but it is for the rest of your life, so choose carefully. Upon hearing the premise of the story, a bunch of little light bulbs started going off upstairs. Luckily, they're LEDs, so it didn't cost me too much. Around this time, I had begun developing a habit of reading during my warm-up sessions in the gym. I had been looking for any excuse to squeeze some extra reading into my day, so after some experimenting, the stationary bikes proved to be quite effective for that. And as such, I'd make it a point to hit the bikes for 30 minutes and read for the entire duration before working out. It turned out to be not only an enjoyable process, but also an active form of meditation. The monotonous physical act of pedaling was incredibly efficient at quieting my intrusive thoughts, leaving me fully present with whatever I happened to be reading at the time. So, once those light bulbs started going off, it wasn't much of an extrapolation to transition from the bikes to the treadmill. And thus, it became a rule. I would only read this book while walking at 4 miles per hour. Now, just to be clear, 4 miles per hour is not the most comfortable walking pace. Certainly not with a book in front of you. It's almost the transitional speed between walking and running, so the gait is incredibly awkward to say the least. Thankfully, for me, most of my friendships were built upon speed walking for ludicrous distances. So the process was manageable. And the results? Fascinating. One of the first things I noticed was that my reading times quickly soared from the usual 30-minute warm-up session to several hours at a time. And I'd have kept going, but unfortunately gyms had a closing time and their employees the life outside of babysitting. I guess that's the price of waiting until sundown to work out. Anywho, regarding this increase in time, I'd noticed that the more I learned about these characters, the more reminiscent they became of my own friendships. Some to such a degree that I began to mentally replace them with my actual friends. With fries in particular, and no, that is not a dollar menu item, thank you very much. McFries I replaced with a friend that I'll refer to as Blue for the sake of anonymity. McFries and Blue are like the older brother of a group. They both carry this air of leadership that naturally leaves you looking up to them. In Blue's case, there is an argument to be made about height, as the man literally rivals giraffes, so can't have no option but to look up to him. Jokes aside, over our accumulated 14 plus years of friendship, Blue and I have spent most of our time together walking obscene distances for no rhyme or reason outside of simply enjoying each other's company. For example, one of our fondest memories together was the time we walked for nearly 10 hours straight in search of this mystical beverage known as a Slurpee. It involved multiple instances of getting lost, a shady golf course, and getting into a stranger's car at 4 in the morning. It was quite the adventure.
Shit!
So because of this association drawn between them, I became attached to these characters rather quickly. Every step made alongside them and each conversation in passing only served to strengthen that bond. So as you can imagine, once the King-isms began to unfold, shit got real fast. Early on in the book, the actual parameters of the story are intentionally kept ambiguous, just long enough such that you are neck deep in the competition with no way of turning back. And if you've gone into it fresh, it's something that catches you off guard in an incredibly disturbing way. That being said, I will do my best not to spoil too much. You've been warned. As mentioned previously, the kingisms began to unfold rather quickly, and suddenly I was left afraid of not only losing these characters, but also losing the friends I had projected upon them. For a while, I felt compelled to keep walking as if I could somehow keep them safe, although logically I understood that 1, it's a book, and 2, the more that pages went by, bad things were inevitably going to happen. I mean, there could only be one winner after all. Canonically speaking, the walk lasts for almost a week straight in its entirety. These characters are forced to walk through extreme weather conditions, acquired illnesses, injuries, and starvation until a winner is proclaimed. And as their circumstances worsened, so too did their mental states. The passages that ensued became increasingly introspective and infatuated with the temptations of death, or quite simply the desire to give up. In my last video, I spoke about how in horror, empathy acts as a catalyst to instill fear onto its observers. Well, in this case, I had quite literally walked miles in their shoes, so the empathetic wave that surged over me was overwhelming, to say the least. Page after page conveyed with desperation the pain of blisters long since bursted and seared from the blacktop beneath them, of comrades succumbing left and right to the emaciation of will, and of the tender longing for a loved one's final embrace. The weight of which, be it from projecting my own life into the story or sympathy drawn from walking alongside them for so long, somehow it managed to manifest itself within me as the words left my eyes. And as a result, I too felt motivated to stop. There was one passage in particular that seemed to contribute the most towards this feeling. It was around this time that Garrity, the main character, began succumbing to the weight of his own predicament. After losing several of his comrades, he himself had caught wind of death's propaganda and soured the enticement of eternal motionless within his mind. He thought to himself, how would it be to lie in the biggest, dustiest library silence of all, dreaming endless, thoughtless dreams behind your gummed down eyelids? No father, mother, girlfriend, lover. The dead are orphans. No company but the silence like a moth's wing. How would that be? Just how would that be?
Now, if that isn't the most I'm 14 and this is deeper than the Mariana Trench shit I've ever heard, then I don't know what is.
With consideration towards all the elements comprising this experience thus far, it's hard to properly translate how exactly I felt while reading that. The closest thing I can compare it to is the proposition of a question. Have you ever felt when somebody does something unexpectedly nice for you, this sensation of floating warmth and tingling? Imagine that, but instead of it being a happy feeling, you're on the brink of eternal sadness, and somehow it brings you a momentary solace as though the boulder were suddenly lifted from the calloused hands of Sisyphus. A bit dramatic, yeah, but it was a fascinating sentiment to ponder in that state of mind nonetheless. Just this idea of letting go, knowing fully well the destination is a mystery until you actually get there. A life without questions, ironically, wouldn't have much meaning. Nor would this story, had I have stopped there. You see, be it to my advantage or a detriment, I can be an incredibly stubborn individual. Specifically, one that detests leaving a task unfinished once started. So, Despite how I was feeling in that particular moment, I continued to plow through. However, I would like to draw your attention to a teeny tiny detail presented earlier in the story. Would you be so kind as to recall me saying that there could only be one winner after all? There'd only be one winner after all.
One winner after one winner. One winner after all.
My boy, Blue!
Any guesses as to what occurred shortly after that paragraph? So, with all the characters I cared about out of the way, you'd think I'd finally put the book down for the evening. You'd be wrong. It instead left me face to face with an odd moment of self-awareness. With the element of companionship removed, I realized that something else had been driving me to continue all along. Competition. It turns out that it wasn't just about ensuring the character's safety or carrying on for their sake. What remained was a morbid curiosity, a drive to see just how far I could go. It certainly wasn't about to let Stebbins win, that vile little cretin. So, with renewed purpose, I continued onward. Since the story concludes shortly afterwards, I don't want to give away too much more. But what I will say is that I continued walking until I finished it, and then continued walking for maybe another half an hour or so afterwards. The odd thing is, I remember those last few steps as being especially light, as though some unknown reserve kicked in. When you've been walking for so long, it's almost easier to keep going than it is to accept the idea of stopping. Because when you inevitably do, it hits you like a truck. The world continues to move in the same manner it did when you were walking, and your legs feel like faint pistons perpetually firing off despite being still. And of course, there's the mental gymnastics of snapping back to reality after 391 pages of horror fiction. At least that's how I felt by the end of this experiment. I do not regret any of the goofy looks I received for doing it, nor how I felt while reading it. It was a completely engrossing experience, and if you have the ability to do it safely, I highly recommend giving it a try. If you do, let me know what you thought about it. Or just let me know what you're reading in general. Right now, I am finishing up East of Eden by John Steinbeck. This is a book that's popped up a lot throughout my life, so it's kind of always been at the back burner of my mind to read, but the final nail in the coffin came from my friend Dylan. He's been on a huge Steinbeck kick, and after talking with him and being encouraged to read it, I finally picked it up. Ironic. Anywho, I'd better get started on all this nonsense, as there is quite a lot to do, so thanks for listening. Maybe next time you stop by, this will all look more like a gym again. Or maybe it won't. There goes my security deposit.